To us, a normal Christian was a target, an easy mark, but a fasting Christian, you looked like you were on fire. I'm not talking about flames, nothing like that. It was a light, an impossibly bright light that was physically painful for us to even look at. It burned. And the longer you went without food, the brighter your spirit burned, and the more transparent your flesh became. We could see the real you, the spirit man, taking over, and it was terrifying. We had no defense against it. It was a power we couldn't touch, couldn't curse, and couldn't stand to be near. How could I see something like that? What was this light, and why did it feel like staring into the sun? Over the next few minutes, I'm going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly what happens in the spiritual realm when a believer pushes their plate away. I'm going to tell you the secrets we knew, the tactics we used, and why fasting was the one weapon we had no answer for. If you want to understand this spiritual reality, subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss what's coming. Have you ever felt a difference when you prayed and fasted? Let me know in the comments. What I just described, that vision of a believer on fire, that wasn't something I learned in church. I saw that as a high-ranking regional coordinator for a satanic organization. For 25 years, my entire life was about gaining power and using it to control the spiritual forces around me. I was good at it. I commanded things you only see in horror movies. But to understand how I got there, to a place where I could see these secrets of the spiritual world, we have to go back. We have to go back to the beginning, to a scared, invisible kid on the south side of Chicago. That version of me, the one who could see into the spiritual world, was born on the south side of Chicago. I was a ghost in my own life. My dad was gone, and my mom worked 2 jobs, so the only time I saw her, she was exhausted, a shadow passing through the kitchen. The neighborhood was a war zone, and the only currency that mattered was power. You were either the one who looked away, or you were the one people looked away from. I learned that lesson early, watching the weak get picked apart on the street corners. I was invisible, unprotected, and I promised myself that one day I would never be a victim again. My real motivation wasn't money or revenge. It was a deep, gnawing hunger to be seen. I just wanted to matter. I remember being about 13, watching the local gang walk down the street. It wasn't just that people were afraid of them, it was that people acknowledged them. They had a presence, a power, and I wanted it more than anything. I have to be honest with you. I didn't want to be good, I just wanted to be powerful. I was a scared kid who was willing to do anything, absolutely anything, to make the world notice I existed. That desperation was the doorway the enemy was waiting for. The gang was my way in, but not through violence like you'd think. What really pulled me in was the occultism they were messing with. It was small stuff at first, rituals for protection, curses to intimidate rivals. I saw them do things that worked, things that gave them an edge nobody else had. For the first time, I felt like I had found a secret, a hidden knowledge that made me superior. An older guy in the group saw my hunger. He didn't hand me a weapon, he handed me a book. He told me, "This is real power." That was my first real contact, and as I opened those pages, I had no idea that I was about to go deeper than I could ever imagine. That book wasn't the end, it was the beginning of the real descent. The street-level curses I'd learned with the gang felt like child's play. Now I was learning structured rituals, things that had a direct, measurable impact. I wasn't just intimidating rivals anymore. I was manipulating reality. A ritual for money would result in a few $100s turning up out of nowhere. A curse would land a rival in the hospital. The man who gave me the book saw my progress. He told me, "You're wasting your talent here. I know people who deal in real power." He introduced me to my first structured coven, and when I walked into that room, the air was cold, thick, and electric. I moved up the ladder fast. They saw I had a natural gift for this world. I was hungry, and more importantly, I wasn't afraid. I went from being an initiate, just learning the names and symbols, to leading rituals myself. Each promotion required a deeper commitment, a more sinister ceremony. We weren't just lighting candles and chanting anymore. There were blood sacrifices, animals at first. The air in those rooms would get heavy, thick with the smell of sulfur and something metallic like old pennies. In return, the power grew. I could influence people with a word. I could see things before they happened. I was finally in control, but things started to get strange, even for me. I'd have these nightmares where I wasn't the one giving the orders. I was the one being watched, judged by the very entities I was summoning. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, feeling a presence in the corner of my bedroom, a heavy parasitic feeling that wasn't friendly at all. My wife started complaining about horrific nightmares, about a coldness in the house that had nothing to do with the thermostat. I told her she was imagining it. I ignored it all because the power was too intoxicating. I was a regional coordinator now, respected and feared. I wasn't about to give that up. As a regional coordinator, I oversaw multiple covens across the state. I had status, knowledge, and what I believed were direct lines to powerful spirits. I thought I was a master, a king in this hidden world. The money was good, the influence was real, and nobody dared to make me feel invisible ever again. But the warning signs were getting louder. The nightmares felt more real than my waking hours. The whispers I heard weren't just in my head anymore. I was ignoring the obvious truth. Every ounce of power I gained was just a loan, and I was about to find out that the interest rate was my soul. The bill was coming due. The power was intoxicating, but the bill was coming due, and it started with my family. My wife couldn't take it anymore. The house was always cold, not a normal cold, but a deep spiritual chill that got into your bones. She kept having these horrible nightmares, feeling like something was watching her, watching our daughter sleep. I remember the day she left. It was a Tuesday in late October 2007. She had our daughter's little pink suitcase packed by the door. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a fear I'd never seen before, and said, "Whatever you've invited into this house, it's starting to look at our child. I'm choosing her." And just like that, they were gone. With them gone, the house became a prison. The whispers I used to ignore were now constant, like a radio playing just out of hearing range. My health fell apart. I started having these migraines that felt like a spike being driven through my skull, so bad I couldn't even stand up. Doctors ran every test imaginable and found nothing. The paranoia was worse. I saw shadows darting in my peripheral vision. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat from nightmares where I wasn't commanding these things. They were devouring me piece by piece. The peace I thought power would bring was a lie. I lived in constant, gut-wrenching terror. The worst part was realizing I had lost control. The very entities I used to command were now making demands of me. I wasn't their master anymore. I was their property, a slave. I tried to quit. 3 separate times, I tried to walk away. The first time, I got into a car accident on the way to tell my superiors I was done. The second time, a sudden, blinding pain hit me, and I collapsed on my kitchen floor. They were sending a clear message. Leaving wasn't an option. I was trapped in the very system I thought I had mastered, and the power I had sold my soul for now owned me completely. My rock bottom came a few months after my family left. I was sitting alone in my empty house, in what used to be my daughter's room. The power was out from a storm, and the only light was from the lightning flashing outside. I had lost my wife, my daughter, my health, and my own will. I was physically exhausted, mentally tormented, and spiritually bankrupt. The entities were all around me. I could feel their cold, parasitic hunger in the air. I had nothing left. I just sat there in the dark, a gun I owned on the table next to me, convinced that was the only way out. I was a king with no kingdom, a master who was a slave. I sat there in the dark, the cold metal of the gun on the table seeming to call to me. Every instinct screamed that this was the only escape. But something, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, stopped me. I couldn't do it. Instead, I stood up, grabbed my car keys, and just walked out. I started driving with no destination, just needing to get away from that house, from the whispers. I drove for hours, until I saw a small, simple church on a quiet street. A few cars were in the lot. I don't know why, but I pulled over. I just felt this pull to go inside, even though every part of my training told me a place like that should burn me. Walking through those doors, I expected to feel sick, to be repulsed by the holiness. The air in my world was always cold, heavy, and parasitic. But this was different. The building was almost empty, just a handful of people praying quietly. As I slid into a pew in the very back, A feeling started in my chest. It wasn't a voice or a vision. It was a tangible, physical warmth. It was clean, pure, and felt like love. It was the complete opposite of the demanding, consuming presence I had served for 25 years. This presence didn't want anything from me. It felt like it was giving something to me. It felt like a father's embrace. That contrast, the sheer shock of feeling pure love instead of pure evil, just broke me. I put my head in my hands and started to sob. It wasn't quiet crying. It was a deep, guttural wailing that came from the very bottom of my soul. I was releasing 25 years of filth, fear, and pain right there on the floor of that little church. The people there didn't stare or judge. One older woman just came and put a hand on my shoulder. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because, for the first time in my adult life, I felt free. It was the feeling of a prisoner of war finally being told the war was over and he could go home. The next morning, I woke up and the house was quiet. For the first time in years, the whispers were gone. The oppressive coldness was replaced by a strange, new stillness. I was shaky, exhausted, but the terror was gone. I knew who I had to call. I picked up the phone and dialed my wife's number. My voice cracked as I tried to explain what happened. I told her, "I think I met God." She was silent for a long moment, and then she said, her voice full of cautious pain, "Derek, I want to believe you. I really do. But I've heard you make promises before. What's different this time?" I didn't have an answer. I just knew everything was. That encounter in the church was the single moment my entire reality shifted. I went from a slave pretending to be a king to a broken man who had been shown a flicker of real freedom. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the war for my soul had been won by a power I never knew existed. That moment saved my life. If you've ever had an experience where God met you at your absolute lowest, I'd be honored if you shared it in the comments below. And please, if this story is speaking to you, like this video so more people can find it. My journey out of the darkness was just beginning. That phone call with my wife was just the beginning. I had to prove I was different, but to do that, I first had to understand what had happened to me and the world I'd just left. The things I had seen from the other side, they were the key. I had to explain why fasting was the one thing we feared. In the spiritual realm, when you fast, your physical body becomes almost transparent, like looking through glass. But your spirit, the real you, becomes solid. It gets bigger, brighter, and more dense. The less you feed your flesh, the more you nourish your spirit, and it literally starts to take over your entire being. We could see it happening, the spirit man growing as the fleshly man faded. What that meant for us was simple. Our food supply was cut off. The demons assigned to a person, they feed on fleshly desires, pride, lust, anger, bitterness. Fasting starves them out. We would see them get weaker, disoriented, like starving animals staggering around, looking for a meal that wasn't there anymore. A 3-day fast would weaken their hold. A 7-day fast would cripple them. And a 21-day fast? That could completely drive them out of a person's life for a long time. We saw it happen. It was a systematic dismantling of the enemy's power source, and we were helpless to stop it. I'll never forget the attack we planned on a suburban Chicago church back in 2006. It was a light station, causing us too much trouble. Our plan was to assign spirits of division to the pastors and financial ruin to the biggest givers. But then the pastor called a 21-day fast. By day 7, the curses we were sending were ricocheting back and making our own people sick. On day 14, we looked at that church in the spirit, and we were terrified. It was surrounded by a fortress of pure light, with warrior angels standing shoulder to shoulder on the walls. I had learned how fasting makes a believer untouchable, how it starves demons, and how it builds a fortress of divine protection. That revelation changed everything for me, but it also painted a massive target on my back. The kingdom of darkness doesn't just let a general walk away. The real fight was just beginning. Leaving that world wasn't like quitting a job. It was like deserting an army in the middle of a war, and they don't take kindly to deserters. Just days after my conversion, 2 men from my old life showed up at my door. They didn't shout. They didn't have to. One of them just smiled and said, "The masters are displeased. They want their property back." That night, the nightmares returned with a vengeance. It was the same old terror, The feeling of being devoured. But this time, I wasn't their servant. I was their enemy. The retaliation had begun, and it was personal. The physical threats were terrifying, but the psychological warfare was worse. In my old life, I was feared and respected. In my new life, at church, I was an outcast. People were suspicious, whispering that I was some kind of spy sent to infiltrate them. I'd sit alone in the back, lonelier than I'd ever been in my empty, haunted house. The temptation to go back was immense. The enemy would whisper, reminding me of the power I once had. "You were a king," it would say. "Now you're just a broken man nobody trusts. Come back, we'll make you powerful again." I had been a master of dark rituals, but I was a complete novice when it came to spiritual warfare from God's side. I had to learn how to fight all over again, with completely new weapons. An old pastor who finally decided to believe me told me to speak the name of Jesus out loud whenever the fear started. At first, it felt foolish, just saying his name into the darkness of my room. But then I'd feel it, a shift in the atmosphere. The cold would recede. The whispers would stop. I clung to scripture like a drowning man clings to a life raft, repeating it until the words became my own. That first year was a brutal, hand-to-hand fight for my soul. I faced direct threats from my old organization, nightly demonic torment, and the crushing isolation that came from a church that didn't trust me. I won each battle not with my old power, but with a new weakness. By surrendering, by crying out to God when I had nothing left. There were times I fell, moments where despair almost won, but I always got back up. It took nearly 2 full years of that constant warfare before I finally felt the ground was solid beneath my feet, before I could sleep through the night in peace. That brutal fight for my soul lasted for years, but peace eventually came. The man who lived in that house, tormented by whispers and shadows, is gone. I spent 25 years chasing power to escape fear, only to become a slave to terror itself. Today, I don't have any of that power. I can't command anything. But for the first time in my adult life, I sleep through the night. The migraines that felt like a spike in my skull are gone. The peace I have now, the quiet in my own mind, is more real and more powerful than anything I ever summoned in the dark. And my family, that was the miracle I never thought I'd see. It wasn't instant. It took years of me proving I was a new man. My wife, she watched me from a distance at first, cautiously. I remember one day she told me, "Derek, the man who left this family was a monster. I don't know him anymore. I only know the man God is building. We rebuilt, brick by painful brick. Today, she's my wife again. My daughter, who was just a little girl when she left, is a young woman who calls me Dad. That word is worth more than all the power I ever had. But I have to be honest with you. It's not a perfect story. The scars are still there. After living in a world built on betrayal and manipulation, trusting people is still the hardest thing for me. I fight it every single day. And sometimes, when I get spiritually lazy or proud, I can still hear the faint echo of those old whispers, trying to tempt me with the memory of control and power. The war for my soul was won at that church, but the daily battle to stay humble and dependent on God is very, very real. I used to wear the title of regional coordinator like a crown, thinking I was a master. In reality, I was the most enslaved person in every room I entered. Today, I have no title. I'm just Derek, a husband, a father, a child of God, and I have never been more free. My life now is about pulling back the curtain on the lies I once peddled. What I lost was restored, but what I gained is infinitely greater. And that's why I have to tell you what I know. Because this isn't just my story. It's a blueprint of our enemy's tactics. I'm not that man anymore. The one who thought he was a king but was really a slave. The peace I have now is real, and it's why I have to tell you this. Stop thinking of fasting as just some religious diet to get God's attention. It's not. It's a declaration of war. It's you telling your flesh to finally shut up so that your spirit, the real you, can stand up and fight. When you fast, you are systematically starving out every enemy that has taken up residence in your life, cutting off their food supply at the source. Maybe you're listening to this and you're where I was. Maybe you're not in the occult, but you're chasing power in your job, in your relationships, trying to control everything because you're terrified of being invisible, of being a victim again. I know that hunger. I also know the price. And if you are involved in something darker, I need you to hear me. The power they promised you is a lie. The entity you serve is not your friend, it is your owner, and I promise you, it will eventually consume you completely. But there is a way out. If you are facing an impossible situation, an addiction you can't shake, a darkness in your family that won't leave, an oppression that feels like a weight on your chest, I am telling you, from the other side, there is a weapon they have absolutely no answer for. Your breakthrough isn't waiting on God to make a move. It's waiting on you to get serious, to push the plate away and fight. The light I saw surrounding that church is real, and it is more powerful than anything you have ever witnessed. The way out has a name. His name is Jesus. You don't need a ritual, you just need to call on Him. If this story has impacted you, please subscribe for more testimonies and like this video so others can find it. Share this with someone who needs to hear that there's hope. And I want to pray for you, so leave a comment with your story or your prayer request. It's time to stop being a target. It's time to start being the fire.